Hey Throdle, do you want to join me and talk to professional drift driver Justin Pawlak? Then keep on watching, as today you're in for a ride. What's up, Throdle? We're going to do a deep dive with Justin Pawlak today, but you know what? You're going to keep wanting to watch to the very end because we're going to tell you about a
giveaway on a couple different items from Link ECU. So stay tuned to make sure you sign up for that.
So Justin, back in the day, the very first competition car that you put together, was that back in high school?
It was, yeah. So I put together a little like drag racing car for the local track back in high school and terrorizing the streets and whatnot. But I've definitely like learned from that and gotten onto the track.
So what kind of car was it? Did you start out with a Sylvia? What was it?
No, it was a 1991 Plymouth Laser, which was a Diamond Star Motors car. It was like the cheapest of the Mitsubishi Eclipses and Eagle Talons. But I bought that thing super cheap and did all the free mods to make it a drag racing car.
Okay, so if we kind of fast forward a little bit to when you started, what, 2005, when you were like 26 or something?
2005, I started in a little naturally aspirated RX-7. It was super slow, but I just like hammered gears and hammered throttle to get every ounce of performance out of that car. And as I progressed, I did like a drivetrain swap to the Turbo 2 transmission and rear end so it could take like clutch kicks and like shift lock a lot better. And then as I saved my money, I put a turbo motor in the car and started competing at local events with that very basic setup.
So it was really grassroots then, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't really get into like major competition until I started like building my own car out of my 2-car garage at my little house in Lawndale. You know, just basic little toolbox and just started tinkering with everything that I could get my hands on. Back then, there was a lot of like Japanese parts importers.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to be friends with the guys that worked at those places. So anytime they got like some cool RX-7 parts in, they'd give me a call and I'd be like first one down there. Yeah, first one down there to get some like cool, unique, old school like Japanese parts that I could utilize on my platform.
But when you started, it was pretty much stock, wasn't it?
Yeah, the car was literally just, it's a kind of a funny story. I found this RX-7. The guy was asking like $700. It was down in Oceanside.
Wow.
I drove down there and his dog had ate the majority of the passenger seat. And I'm like, how is this dog even still alive with how much foam it ate? And anyway, the car smelled awful, but it was like a good chassis and like drivetrain. So I bought the car. As I'm driving it home, I stop at the gas station to put fuel in it, and there's literally snails that like were infested into this car, and they were all over the thing. So I'm like wiping snails off this car to get it home. And as soon as I got it home, I literally like stripped the entire interior and like power washed the whole car because it was just
snails. Okay, that's disgusting.
They were all over the place, but it's kind of like a memorable start to like how grassroots and simple it is. I literally just took like a stock car and started modifying it to what it became as like a Formula Drift car in 2008.
Okay. Cool. So did you always know you wanted to go into drifting? Like, why didn't you go into drag racing? Why drifting?
So when I first saw drifting, probably around year 2002 or 3, I was living in Arizona. I came to California and I watched like a drift show off at Irwindale Speedway, and it just captured my attention.
Yeah.
I'm like, these cars have like body kits and wheels and they're slammed and they look like show cars, but then these dudes are doing like crazy like maneuvers in them, and I didn't even really understand or get like what it was. But I love the aspect of drifting where you basically build like this pristine like show car, but then you don't just like drive it and park it. You get in it and you hammer on it to like have all the performance. So it's that aesthetic and performance all in one, and it's an expression of yourself. So everybody has their own style, which is, I think, the coolest thing about drifting is that you can literally build like whatever you want, and that's an expression of yourself. And then also your driving is an expression of yourself. Like some people have a more conservative, very methodical approach to driving. And then there's others like me that I'm just like flat out, like full aggressive, like big angle, like is he going to stick it this time or is he going to like miss it? And I think that's one thing that my fans like about my driving style is like I'm always trying for like the big flick entry, big transition, and sometimes like I nail it and sometimes I nail the wall.
So tell us about one of the times that you nailed the walls.
I'd probably say like my biggest wreck was around 2012 or 13. It was in qualifying at Long Beach. I was straight out of the gate in practice. I was like killing it, like just barely grazing the wall. And like, I mean, everybody was like, man, are you like, this is practice. You need to like calm down. Like you can't win practice. And I'm like, no, I'm like I'm feeling it. And then first qualifying run, I felt like I needed to like step it up even more. And I stepped it up like right into the wall. And on 10A, I clipped the wall. It smashed the quarter panel. It rotated me, and then I slammed into the K-rail, pushed the K-rail like a couple feet, demolished the front of the car. Fortunately, like I had a fantastic team that was able to patch the car back up together, but it literally had no hood, no fenders, no bumper, no lights, no anything. It was just like the bare frame of the car in the front. But I went out and qualified and got into the show, and we took the car back to the workshop on that night, and we were able to patch it all back together and make it look like a full car for competition.
So success to you doesn't really mean how many podiums that you're racking up there.
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think, you know, I'm very grateful for my health. I'm very grateful for all the opportunities that I've had and all the companies that I get to work with. I mean, being a good mentor for my son and showing him like the ways I like to do things, and just trying to be a good person and help people, and just to be like a positive person in society, I think is really like what, like I love the opportunity in my position. Yeah, winning is great. Obviously, we all go to the event to win. Like 100%. You don't put in effort like we do, the blood, sweat, and tears of myself, my crew. You don't go to the track without wanting to win.
Yeah.
But the thing is with drifting, and I've noticed over the years, I've been very successful and I've been not successful. And in those successes, like say if I win an event, literally Sunday, I'm like, all right, back to square one. Like, what are we doing next? Like that high of winning doesn't last. So you're always chasing that win, and if you get caught up in like I have to win, or like I'm not like happy with where I'm at, dude, you will be like depressed.
Well, I mean, you said it yourself. You are your own competition, right? You're not out there to beat somebody else. You're just there to beat yourself and make yourself better each time.
And I'm the best at beating myself.
And beating yourself up too.
When all the stars align, like I feel like I'm very hard to beat. Like
Yeah.
I know that I have the driver's skill set. I have the car. You know, the car is definitely, there's been times that I'm like, we don't really have the car, but I think the car is like to the point when everything is like working properly, like it has been like the latter part of this year. I'm very hard to beat because of like how intense of a driver I am and whatnot, but I am definitely the best at beating myself. And that's something that I continue to work on, is the mental game. You know, I've read multiple books. I've turned in other drivers onto like a book like Mind Gym and other like, just like mind and like mental coaching kind of books to help you stay focused and dialed in, because that's literally the hardest thing in our sport.
Yeah.
It's not traditional racing where you basically race around a track and you have, oh, I messed up this corner, let me make up like a half a second on this corner. In this type of racing, if you mess up this corner, your weekend's over,
Wow.
because you have 30-second run, and then you have to go in the other position, 30-second run. And if you make a mistake and the other person doesn't make a mistake, your weekend's over. But in traditional racing, if you make a slight mistake and you can drive extra hard in those other corners to make up that mistake,
Yeah.
you can't really, you're so spotlighted for the short period of time, you can't really make up if you make a mistake. It's very much like overexposed.
Let's talk about when you went pro. So when you went pro, what year was it?
So 2008 was when I went pro, and honestly, like I kind of thought I was a little late to the show because I saw like how these cars were progressing, and I was like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna have like enough car to be competitive, because building one of these cars is like really expensive.
Well,
but
500 hours, if you were to pay someone for
Yeah.
500 hours, that's a lot.
Like I couldn't afford to pay somebody to build
Yeah.
this car. Like that's why I kind of like assumed that expense with myself. But also it dials you in. Like I know everything about this car. So
Yeah.
any weird noise or creak or whatever, like I'm like, oh, I know what that is. But going back to like when I started FD, I was worried about me being too late to the show, but I kind of feel like I was right at the end of a huge transition in the sport. Because from 2008 to 2010 was when engines got really crazy, big power, quick changes, dog boxes, like all that stuff was starting to like get into the series, which just takes like the level of like cost of the car from like 50,000, which my car was probably like 30,000, to like 100 or like 120,000.
Wow.
And now, I mean, like this car behind me is probably like $175,000. And there's cars that have more technology than this. I'd say they're a $200,000 car. Like, how do you compete in something like that if you don't have the financial means or the financial backing to do that?
Well, that's a good question because a lot of the Throdle members were saying, hey, you know, one of the things we want to know is how do you get started in it?
Well,
And would you suggest that you do that?
to get started into drifting is very simple. You
Right.
buy a rear-wheel drive car, you put a good set of like field coilovers on it, a good differential, or even just like a welded diff or a spool.
Yeah.
If you know how to weld well, you can weld it. If you don't know how to weld, just buy a spool because
Right.
spools are cheap, like $100. So you do coilovers, a spool, and then some type of slight angle kit. I wouldn't say go to like the full like 74 degrees steering
Yeah.
angle. I would say like a rack spacer or, you know, maybe a modified knuckle, but you could like 55, 60 degrees of angle is more than enough to learn. And spend the time and money on tires and practice.
Okay.
Don't overbuild your car. Don't worry about, oh, I gotta have a V8, I gotta have turbo, I gotta have supercharger, I gotta have a quick change, I gotta have a dog box, I gotta. No, you don't need any of that. You literally need a rear-wheel drive car and you need a lot of tires.
Okay.
Because the more practice that you make, the better that you're gonna become as a driver. And then once you get to the point where you feel like I am completely maxing this car out, as much performance as I can extract out of this, then add horsepower. Or then
okay.
add better drivetrain. Because once you do horsepower, you have to do all the supporting mods, transmission, driveline, differential, axles, clutch. Like you
That
have
adds
to
up.
upgrade all that stuff, and that's where the price goes up.
Yeah.
And then, hey, when you make like 500 horsepower, guess what? That set of tires that lasted all day, now you're going through 10 sets of tires. So it's like exponential on like cost of this, where it's just like boom, like super expensive. Where
Yeah.
I mean, it costs, I bet you some of these prospect guys, they're building, you know, $80,000 to $100,000 cars, and then it probably costs $60,000 to run their program for the 4 rounds.
Wow.
So you're looking at like, you know, $140,000 to $200,000 like all in,
Yeah.
you know, with tire expense and like all of these things, because sponsors don't just like make it rain, you know, as much as you want it to. You have to provide a return for their investment. And I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing to understand getting into this game, is that sponsors aren't just going to be like, hey, here's all these parts and here's all this money. Like, it doesn't work like that. They are basically utilizing you as a marketing strategy and a brand ambassador for their parts. So you as a driver, you as a brand ambassador, you really need to show like, hey, this is what I use, this is why I use it. And don't just go after anything, because those brands define you as a person.
Yeah.
And you want to like align with those brands that represent you best. Like, I've turned down money deals and product deals on stuff that I'm like, I would never use that on my car,
Yeah.
because I don't believe in it. And then also too, you want your brands to align. So if like, oh, I have this like not very well known, not good quality, it's just kind of like junky parts. Like, I don't think that Ford would be stoked about me like being a brand ambassador for that. Like,
Yeah.
I want to represent like Ford and Lucas and Falcon, like these really good brands that really put a lot of like engineering into their parts. They stand behind the quality of their parts. And, you know, I can say, hey, like, I use these on my car. It's not just a sticker on the car.
Yeah, and I think that's what fans really want to know. Like, does he actually use them? Or, you know, does he just put on the decal and then that's it, right?
Every sticker on the car, I use their product. And there's a reason why the stickers on the car is because I believe in their product.
Yeah. I mean, even when I look behind you, which is that rock crawler in there, and we talked a little bit about the ECU unit, didn't you actually, out of your own pocket, you went and you bought Linky C's part and you put it in there,
Yeah,
right?
so I mean, that's the thing is like, even like I want to use the parts that are going to be best for
Yeah.
the application. So if it's a matter of like, oh, I could get this free part, or I could spend a little bit more and get something that I know is going to work.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm going to try to like get that sponsored, but maybe I'm not going to be able to get that sponsored.
Right.
So it would make more sense in the long run, do it right the first time.
Yeah.
Instead of like,
save yourself
oh,
the time and effort, right?
yeah, because if you do it twice, like what's your time worth and what's your money worth?
Yeah.
Like I spent $50 on this item when I could have spent $80 on this item. This item breaks, and then what? Now I'm spending $130 on this item, or I spend another $50 on this, so I spent $100 and it still is junky. So then I'm spending $180 on like when I should have just spent the $80.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, that's one of the things about you. You're very credible because, people know, okay, well, I really am the brand.
Well, I was really good at math, so I like figured like, hey, I like my money, so I don't like to waste my money.
Okay, all right, cool. So when we talk about, the pro stack drivers and what they have to do to get into the sport, if somebody was just an amateur, would you suggest that they go to a drift school? Is that the best way to start practicing, or what should they do?
Yeah, so when I started drifting, Taka Aono is kind of like a local, like old school drifter. He gave me a lot of like insight. I mean, you can go to a drift school if you don't have like any knowledge of like drifting at all. Like Taka actually has a drift school locally in the LA area.
Yeah.
Chelsea Denofa has a drift school in the Pacific Northwest. I don't know about East Coast too much about drift schools. I think Josh Robinson has a drift school down in like Texas. So there are different like people that have cars available and instruction available. I've helped Taka on some higher end instruction.
Yeah.
Like Alec Honendale came for like a drift school with him, and then I came in for the third day as like a accelerated like higher end level drift instruction. There's definitely opportunities with that, but me personally, like I probably wouldn't pay to go to a drift school. Like I would just spend the money on a car, go to events, and then ask people. Like
Yeah, okay.
if I'm at an event, say like Winter Jam that's coming up, if I go and I'm like driving there, I'll have people come over and like, hey, do you have any suggestions? Or like, hey, what's your alignment settings? Or what do you think I should do? So my alignment settings aren't necessarily going to work for you with like a BMW or an ARC-7 or whatever, but most pros are very helpful in like, hey, I'll tell you what I think you should run
Yeah.
based on your power levels and your car setup. This will be a good suggestion to like start with of like, hey, this is your toe setting that I would run, or this is like, your camber setting that you should run. And I'm more than happy to help like guide these people, because I think that's one of the big misses in pro spec
Yeah.
is that they throw all these parts at their car, but they're like, I don't know what to do with anything. Like I don't know how to like set up the suspension to get the most performance out of the car, and like I mean, the suspension is the secret sauce.
Yeah.
It's easier to make power. It's easier to like buy all the right drivetrain components, and you have all this adjustable suspension. But if it's not adjusted properly, the car's not going to work. And that's a huge miss on the amateurs. They put all this adjustable suspension on their car and they never align the car. So it's like you have like these wheels that are like pointed in all different directions, and you really need to be very precise on like how you have the alignment set up, because it can drive really wonky. You can have the best parts not aligned and it'd be like, man, this feels like really weird. But then you align it and it's like, oh, this is like cherry, like drives like super good.
So let's talk about your drive style, because I've seen you. I've been in the car with you. And for those of you who haven't checked it, you have to watch the video of him drifting me. But you're almost like, it's kind of like a leisurely Sunday drive in there with you. I was like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, some people are very like animated in their driving.
Yeah.
Like they're like all over the place. Me, I don't know, like I have gotten into this habit driving one-handed. So I'll pretty much just like rest my hand on initiation. I'll rest my hand on the e-brake, like so it's like ready to go, and I'll just kind of drive one-handed. And in some of the
just
videos, it
rolling.
literally looks like, is he like just going to church, or like where is he going? And I don't know. That's just kind of, I think the suspension setup, like how much self-steer I have into the car, and also too in drifting, it's a lot about like throttle control.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you're basically controlling the pitch of the car with throttle input. So more throttle, depending on your setup, will get you like more angle.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of like, once it's set at angle, then you kind of drive it from that position. And then you lift and the car will grip up and transition. You step back on throttle like to catch it. So my hands don't really need to do a lot because I'm doing everything with my feet.
Okay, all right. We never really focus on your feet, so that's also
Yeah,
secret sauce.
So like your feet, your footwork, and your hand brake, and I don't really try to use like much braking at all. If I'm trying to slow down, I'm going to try to chuck more angle and use the scrub of the car to slow down.
Yeah.
And e-brake, I don't really try to use too much either because it's kind of viewed as a correction.
Okay.
So I try to like either use like a little bit of a flick or like a clutch kick to like initiate drift, and then I try to just stay on throttle through the whole course as much as possible because I think that's the most stylish, and like it's audibly like intense, like having just the engine roaring,
and that's what the crowd loves, right?
Yeah.
They love the noise that you're producing.
Absolutely, and that goes into the whole style. You know,
Yeah.
It's like that sensory overload. You have the visual of the smoke and the angle of the car, and you have like the smell of the smoke and the rubber, and then you have like the sound of the car and just everything. It's like a sensory overload. And I think that's why a lot of people are drawn to drifting because it's unlike any other motorsport. It's like what the guys at NASCAR do when they celebrate, like in their victory, but like we're doing it in competition.
So a lot of it is you. That car is you. It's your statement. You put tons of custom on it. How much do you pour into the design of it? So at the beginning of each season, like, what do you do?
So this car's pretty hammered from like this season, which is to be expected. I mean, pretty much every competition drift car at the end of the year looks like it just came out of a war zone.
Yeah.
So this car will actually get all of the Anderson composite panels will be pulled off and thrown up on the wall probably, and it'll get all new skins and like the body panels actually fit really good out of the box, but I do have to like trim for some clearances for like the wheels and the steering, like with how much steering it gets, I have to trim a little bit on the fenders. But I'll basically reskin the whole thing and it'll look brand new for the next season. So I always try to make the car look as pristine as possible beginning of the season, and then kind of just let it ride.
Outside of drifting, tell us a little bit about you.
So yeah, outside of drifting, when I'm not at the shop, one thing that I definitely enjoy doing is either RC rock crawling with my son, RC drifting. So we're like big into like RC stuff. We have a local track here called Super G that's like super rad, probably the coolest like RC track, definitely in California and probably in the United States, which is like 7 miles away. And then about like 3 miles away, there's Brackett Airfield, which is some of the coolest scale rock crawling. But beyond that, we've gotten into like full-size rock crawling as well. So I'm building a portal axle rear steer car, which probably sounds like wah, 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 wah. But it's like going to be like the upper echelon of rock crawlers. Not the go fast stuff, but the crazy like crawling up crazy obstacles and whatnot. So I'm in the middle of building that. My son has a rock crawler as well. It's a little Suzuki drivetrain on 37-inch Falcon tires and a little rock buggy. So I take him out and he drives that. We've gone to Colorado and up to Johnson Valley. And these are just like other things that we do for fun. And it's a great bonding experience with him. He's 9 years old. He started driving when he was 8. I just taught him how to drive a manual transmission this summer.
And he's 9?
Well, it's one of those things, like he says he wants to be a driver. So I'm like, I'm taking him through the things that I did when I was young, but also giving him other opportunities as well. And honestly, like my family is like everything to me. That the moments that I have with my son to like see his enthusiasm about cars and whatnot is very special, because I think a lot of these kids are so into like video games that they don't really understand there's like a real life going outside of what's going on in the screen. And I let my son play video games, and I think that's good for like hand-eye coordination, but I limit it because I want to like, I you know, that's why we do the RC stuff, because that's something that's relatable that he can like work on, and he can change the tires and tighten like the suspension bolts, and he can learn like, hey, this is a coilover, and this is like the steering, and this is the drivetrain, these are the axles and the drive shafts and the motor, and all of these different components that relate to the real thing.
So where did you learn this stuff? So I know you're teaching your son, but who taught you?
So my mom was like into cars when like a little bit like before I was born. Like she did some drag racing and stuff.
Your mom did drag racing?
Yeah,
that's a cool mom.
She had some like hot rods that she used to drag race. And my dad always like was around and like kind of like helped me tinker on things when I was learning. But I think I was very like self-taught. I don't really know exactly like where I got the car bug from, but when I was 15, I had a car and a truck. So before I even
Before
started,
you could even have a license.
yeah, I was adamant. Well, I think cars are freedom.
Oh, okay. All
Because
right.
riding my mountain bike around, I could only get so far. But I saw cars as being, hey, I can drive 30 minutes to the beach.
Yeah.
And, on a bike, that's a long day. But in a car, that's like a short drive. So I think I saw initially cars as like the freedom to like get out and explore, because I love exploring, even if it's like rock crawling or just jumping in like my wife's Jeep, or I've had multiple Jeeps, I've had multiple like off-road rigs, and going through the mountains and going camping or going to the Rubicon Trail or Fordyce or
Nice.
any of these like destination spots where you can't drive your Toyota Camry. You need
Yeah.
like a properly set up vehicle to get to these spots. And I mean, it's amazing views that you get to see, and like the animal, the wildlife, and just, it's real life, and not
Yeah.
like just sitting on your couch watching TV, or like, oh, look at these destinations we could go to. Like, I'd rather go out and get dirty and go camping and like get to these actual destinations and breathe fresh air and just have these experiences that last a lifetime.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about 2021. Were you happy with when you came into 2021? You must have set your goals for what you wanted to do with FD. Did you achieve them?
No, no, not at all.
Okay.
No.
All right. What did you set out to do then?
I mean, I wanted to finish like top 5.
Yeah.
And we started out really strong. We were 4th going into the 3rd round of competition. Everything was like working great. And then we ended up getting 3rd place at Orlando. And I literally blew my engine apart. It was a
Yeah.
pretty crazy, but I think impressive like run. The engine blew on entry, and I literally just kept the throttle like matted the entire run. There was smoke coming out of everything from the engine to the rear end to everything. But that set up like the beginning of a really tough part of the season. So fortunately, the failure in PA led to us discovering like what the issue was. We rectified it, and then the second half of the season was better. But the problem is like in drifting, I mean, we had a 3 one more time battle with
Yeah.
Vaughan Jr. in top 32, or I'm sorry, in 16. So we got knocked out early there. We had a 3 one more time battle with Chris Forsberg in Long Beach, and we got knocked out in 32. So it was really hard to regain the momentum after Orlando, when we had that engine failure, and then also having another engine failure in PA. It was just like, you have to keep that momentum throughout the season. Otherwise, you're not going to get the results that you want. And you miss one event, it really knocks you down in the standings. And then you miss another event, and it knocks you down further. And, like Frederick, he kind of like just kept that momentum through
Yeah,
the
he had
entire
an
season.
amazing season, didn't he?
Same thing with like Matt and Odie. They finished top 3 because they always kept that momentum. They never
Yeah.
really had like a hard like fall. And that's what you have to do in competition. And unfortunately, it just wasn't our year. But walking away from it, we learned a ton about the engine.
Yeah, okay.
We really got the suspension dialed in. The gearing throughout every course we have dialed. So moving into 2022, we already know what our gearing is going to be, so we can hit the track with a very good setup right out of the box.
So how do you keep motivating yourself? I mean, you're really competing against yourself. How do you keep going back year after year?
I think it's that, you're always chasing that like perfection. Like I want to have like that perfect season,
Yeah.
but also like perfecting the car. And like, if I see something like wrong or something's not working like to 100%, I am a perfectionist. Like I want to make it work well. And
Yeah.
I think in this position or in this sport, you have to be self-motivated, because I don't have like a
Yeah.
hype man being like, you can do it, or like a coach telling me like, all right, push up another rep, or like it's me literally walking through that door every single day, seeing this car or seeing this buggy and being like, hey, this is what I got to do today.
Let's talk a little bit about practicing. So you said to advice to the younger drivers that they should just, get there and they should just practice and practice. What do you do for practicing?
So some off seasons I practice a little bit more. Some seasons I practice a little bit less. It's definitely important to like stay sharp.
Yeah.
I've gone off seasons and I've only been focused on like driving the car, and then I get to Long Beach and I'm like, how do I shift this thing? Like I kind of have like a mental like space where I'm like, I don't even remember like do I remember how to drift? So it is definitely important to like drive if you have a long split in your driving, which is typically between Irwindale and Long Beach. To like drive, I try to drive at least once a month to just stay sharp. And then throughout the season, you're driving quite a bit, but you have so many events like sprinkled in. I don't really do a lot of practicing in between rounds because it's pretty much just enough time to like go fix the car, go to the next event, go fix the car, go to the next event. But when you're coming up, I was probably driving at a minimum of 2 times per month.
Okay.
Maybe even 3 times per month, because if you think about it, like you have to crawl before you walk.
Yeah.
And you have to walk before you run, and you have to like if you want to get to sprinting, like you have to like go through the baby steps. You can't just like come out with some crazy car that has all of the angle and all of the power and not know how to use it.
Yeah.
And once you have the skill set, it's like riding a bike. Like you're going to be able to maintain that skill set. But to get to this skill set, you can't start with the best car and think that you're going to be the best driver. You invest all of this into your car, but you have to invest in yourself as well.
So it sounds like, nowadays you can go into pros really, really quickly. Are you kind of for that, or are you kind of like against that kind of theory?
I'm not like, it's probably because it's the way that I like came up. And I went to a lot of like amateur events, and then I went to like some pro-am events.
Yeah.
And then I went to like, I just did a lot of events to get my license.
Yeah.
I didn't go to like a single qualifier where you pretty much have like, you have the investment of like going to all the amateur events, but then you go to like one event and then all of a sudden, bam, you're pro.
Yeah.
It's like, what did that really teach you? Like, I know financially it's easier to go that route, but in the long run, is that a better investment into your career?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you want to be someone who's still here 16 years from now, like you are, right?
Right. Like I wouldn't want to just jump into it because that doesn't teach you like, hey, I have to figure out these logistical challenges. And like, yeah, you may complain like, oh, I spent all this money going to all these events just to get my pro license. Well, do you think it's going to get any easier?
No.
Like now you have to travel across the entire country, not just your region. So if you can't handle the logistical challenges of your region to get your license, what makes you think that you're going to have everything dialed in to run a national series and be competitive in that? And then beyond that, from Pro Spec to Pro 1, you have national with twice as many events.
Yeah, that's true.
So I understand the reasoning for the single event qualifier, and if your goal is to like, I want to be a pro driver, then that's great. But if you want to have like a legacy and like be a pro driver that was remembered, you really need to like work for it and earn it instead of just having the title of like, I'm a pro driver. And that's not really why I got into this. I got into this because I wanted to go pro. I felt like I took longer steps to get there.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm trying to create my legacy and be remembered as not like, hey, who's the guy that drove that one car in like 2017 and he competed at like 3 events? Like, I don't even know who that was. But for me, like, I want to be remembered as like the guy that, oh, JTP, yeah, he always had those like crazy entries and like the big angle, and we never knew if he was gonna spin out or like hold his like angle or whatever. And I just like, I want to be remembered as a like stylish, like fun, exciting driver to watch.
And someone that the just crowd roars as soon as you come out, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, I may not be the best like driver in the world. I mean, I think that's somebody like James Dean. Like that dude has gone literally all over the world and whooped everybody. But he also like leaves a really positive mark everywhere that he goes. I mean, he's a super fun and amazing driver and just a cool guy to like hang out with. Just insane skill set, and he will go down as like one of the best drivers ever. I don't think I'm going to be that guy because I'm not as winning as he is, but I think I'm going to leave my mark on on the drifting community and my legacy as just being a fun, exciting driver to watch.
So what are we going to see from you next here on the Throdle channel?
Well, I think we're going to be doing a giveaway with Link. We're going to give away a swag pack, and then also we're going to have an opportunity to win a couple tickets and some VIP passes to an FD event coming up. So I'm excited to get you guys like tuned in with that, so you have an opportunity to win those.
Great. And just so you know, to make sure that you can qualify for that, what you have to do is you need to download the Throdle app, you need to create your profile, and you need to either add the car that you've got and then tag in Link ECU, or do a post and add in Link ECU. And we're going to let Justin be the judge of what he
I'll
thinks
pick the coolest car and the coolest post, so make sure you come up with some good content.
Awesome. So what are we going to see from you next? You're heading to Winter Jam, right?
We're going to be getting a rock crawler together and going doing some off-roading, and I can show you guys a little bit about some cool other things that I do, like rock crawling and some adventuring outdoors.
So make sure that you subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so you get notified when we upload that video, because you're not going to want to miss out on that off-roading experience. So thanks for watching, and join us next time as Throdle's fueling connections and driving experiences.